Our trillions of microbes living within. We meet again. But this time, focusing in on how they can be manipulated for evil. By none other than your own mind. If you didn't have microbe mind manipulation on your schedule today, you do now. Let's go. Yo, what is up? Welcome back to another week of How to Health. My name is Kevin. I run liftandbalance.com, where we take aim at all things health and longevity and do it in an odd, weird, interesting, and highly sarcastic way. Today we are venturing up, down, and all around the gut-brain axis, exploring how exactly our psychological and emotional state may wield power over our oh-so-critical for health and longevity microbiome and gut wall. And of course, highlighting the things that you can do to modify that signal for your advantage. In particular, proactive ways to de-stress yourself. Or as I like to think about it, making it physiological and biochemically harder to become stressed in the first place. Because as we know, the 5-pound mushy membrane, which sits within our cranial cabinets, is quite powerful. Being able to activate a downstream stress response in a matter of seconds, and do it from a simple thought or feeling, driving a flurry of biochemical activity throughout the different regions of the brain, upregulating the secretion of stress hormones, constricting blood vessels, increasing heart rate, blood pressure, core body temperature, breathing, and immune activity. All in the presence of no immediate danger. Just a social media post you don't agree with, a triggering news headline, or even worse, someone calling on you to answer a question in a group of virtual people. Yeah, nightmare fuel, I know. This is the modern stress response, no longer driven by threats in the physical environment like it was for the millions of years of our primate evolution, but instead the psychological and emotional threats that we make up in our minds. I mean, I guess we gotta worry about something, right? And it just so happens that when this stress is chronic or constant, day in and day out, it has some pretty substantial implications on both our present day health and vitality over time, aka our longevity, a topic which we discuss in detail in this video here, which puts it at the top of the longevity liability mountain right alongside chronic inflammation, being a major accelerator of any dysfunction that's already happening within. And throughout the decades of modern research on the topic, one of these systems that seems to have a clear and distinct association to these brain-derived woes is the gut, as mental stress has been clearly associated to IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, a condition of gut dysfunction that affects hundreds of millions of people worldwide. However, the exact mechanisms behind this complex brain-gut interplay is still being mapped out, which makes this new, hot off the scientific streets research extra interesting. Let's take a look. A group of international researchers sought to see how psychologically derived stress impacted the prevalence of gut dysfunctions and disorders, along with what exact mechanisms were driving the change. To do this, they used both mouse and human models to observe how the gut responded to chronic stress, using the mice to identify the mechanism and the humans to see if the pathways translated across the species gap. So they first subjected mice to 2 weeks of chronic stress, finding morphological changes in the mice's guts consistent with a loss of intestinal function, which, might I add, were still present up to 2 weeks after the mice were no longer subjected to the stress. Here, they observed a disruption in the intestinal stem cells of the mice, finding that the stress hindered their ability to differentiate into the different epithelial cells needed to adequately replenish the gut wall. Oh, and as they dug deeper, they found all this seemed to be driven by high levels of IAA, indole 3 acetate, a metabolite interestingly secreted by certain species of bacteria called Lactobacillus marinus, which, when checked for prevalence, had increased in abundance in the mice after the stress intervention. Interesting. And to further validate this, they performed a series of fecal matter transplants between the stressed mice and germ-free mice. And yeah, that's literally transplanting microbes from one organism's you-know-what to another organism's you-know-what. So hopefully they used nose plugs. And wouldn't you know it, they saw the same outcomes. So, as a final test, researchers decided to take this exploration one step further and see if levels of IAA were elevated in humans with documented mental distress disorders. And you wouldn't believe it, but they were, along with elevated levels of Lactobacillus marinus. You don't say. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't to say that mental distress is the sole driver of gut dysfunction, because it most certainly is not. However, this does show the potential pathway at play by which the gut microbiome relays stress signals from the brain and shapes the susceptibility of gut wall or epithelial cell injury in mice, officially. But those elevated human markers certainly make the case for a follow-up exploration. And as we wait for that to get done, it's probably a good idea for your gut and rest of your body to proactively manage and mitigate your time in fight or flight mode. So let's talk about some ways to do just that. For the broader population in this 24/7 on-the-go world, thought-provoked stress, anxiety, fear, and depression seem to be taking up an unfair share of mental cycles. And as discussed, over time, the overactivation of this psychologically driven stress response can impair our cellular self to the point of dysfunction and disease, making it a top longevity liability that we intelligent walking apes face. Thus, the way we think, the mental frameworks that we build, along with the habits and systems we deploy to keep us balanced in this chaotic world, are critical. Because just as bad internal vibes can bring us down, good ones can do the exact opposite. Oxytocin, anyone? Side note, just so happens our gut microbes influence that feel-good hormone too, as we saw here. Now, it's important to remember, we all get worked up at some point or another. That's just part of being the most cognitively advanced organisms living in the most prosperous time civilization has ever seen. We're emotional creatures with advanced social constructs. For the first time, not having to spend all day, every day, completing tasks to ensure the survival of the species. So instead, we just create imaginary scenarios in our head based off some triggering stimuli we just scrolled through on our nifty connectivity devices. I bring this up because it is important context to understand to develop a solution. So knowing what we know about the deleterious effects of chronic stress, which as mentioned we cover in depth in videos which will be linked below, let's talk about ways to play the hand that you're dealt the best you can and control what you can control. First, starting with the table stakes. Of course. Things that you can control and do every day which positively affect the cellular and metabolic state of your brain, and your entire body, for that matter. Habits that shift your biochemistry to feel better, be more relaxed, and more optimistic. We're talking the food we eat. Are you eating high-quality real whole foods? Or their ultra-processed alternatives? Daily movement. Are you moving your badonkadonk in an intentional, methodical way on a frequent basis? High-quality circadian-aligned sleep. This is a big one, because deprived sleep has been linked to elevated stress the next day. Are you getting up and going to bed in accordance to our natural daylight cycles and prioritizing 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night? And finally, nature. Are you interacting with the environment which we've evolved in and have deep, health-promoting, mind-calming connections to? The goal here is all about making it harder to become stressed in the first place. For example, if you start your day with a workout, The biochemical shifts you've induced will make it straight up harder to get stressed for many hours thereafter. Combine that with nourishing food, high quality sleep, and adequate outdoor time, and you are straight up building a biological wall, a great, beautiful wall, against those stress demons. And as another reminder, deep dives on all this, link below. Moving away from the table stakes, there are also a number of habits which have shown great promise in elevating peace of mind. One of my favorites is simply spending a few minutes each day observing your mind, intentionally getting a grip on what's going on up there, because understanding your baseline is step one in deploying any meaningful change. And here's one of the best ways to do it. Prioritize 1 to 10 minutes, whatever you can spare each day, and simply sit still, observing thoughts as they pop up into your head and letting them go. Yes, this may sound a little familiar, like something called mindfulness or meditation, because it is. A practice like this has been shown to induce beneficial biological effects on so many levels. But in this context, it helps you baseline your mind and document what type of pent-up, repetitive thoughts may be behind certain emotional stress-inducing tendencies. Your mind is the sole and most important thing that you have control over in this world. But left to its own devices, without putting in the work to build a framework to ingest the many happenings you encounter each day, framing them in a way which promotes the mindset you desire, is a dangerous game. Remember, a positive mindset is like a muscle. You gotta exercise it. Subtle reminders throughout the day can help keep you on track. Maybe it's a positive note on your morning alarm or calendar, or repeating the values you want to identify with. You could journal or verbalize what you're grateful for each day. Send good vibes someone else's way, or simply remind yourself to take things for what they are. Let each situation pass through you. Sleep on it and assess them without the emotional baggage the next day. A good retrospective exercise is asking yourself post-stress event, was that thing that got me all worked up worth my time or energy? Did anything change? Did it bring me any value or just drain me? Many times, it's only the latter. This brings awareness to it and helps you potentially prevent it from happening again in the future. And when you begin to identify those triggers, beginning to distance yourself from them will become a no-brainer. This could be things like the 24/7 news cycle, your social media feeds, or even toxic people, job situations, and relationships. Remember, the environment we place ourselves in is one of the biggest modulators of our present-day health and long-term longevity. So it behooves you to make it as friendly as possible. Control what you can control. Know that things typically are neither as good or as bad as they may seem. And that change doesn't happen overnight. It happens over many nights. So be patient and kind to yourself along the way. Your mindset is one of the best health tools that you have. Being able to radically improve your present day and increase your odds, likelihood, and probability of vitality over time. One of the ways being through the modulation of the trillions of microorganisms living within you right here, right now. So start making the intentional choice to use it for good, instead of deploying mental sharks with laser beams against your entire body. You got this.